Okay, so back again. We'll go back to sharing the screen. Come on. And we'll go to slideshow, current slide. All right, so this is part 2 of my talk on the landscape history of RMBL. Laura, in case you've forgotten who I am. And this is part 2, the establishment of Gothic. Okay, so with that backdrop of part 1 with definitions and so forth, let's look now at the developments here in Gunnison County. This is a map from 1895, so it's actually a little bit after Gothic was established. And on the map, you can see these thicker black lines are rail lines where the railroads ended up being built. And the roads are this sort of little skinny lines that look like they might be rivers. At least I think that's what they are. Anyway, so the towns in Gunnison County started developing in the mid-1870s as news of mineral finds spread across Colorado. The town of Crested Butte, which is the nearest town to Gothic, was established in 1878. This photo is from 1910, or roughly, but it give you a sense of both Crested Butte Mountain and what the town site what the town looked like then. And in late May of 1879, 2 brothers, John and David Jennings, discovered a mine in the Copper Creek Basin, roughly 10 miles north of Crested Butte, which they named the Sylvanite Mine. I think this is a photograph from 1929 of the Sylvanite Basin, so it gives you a sense of where this mine was located. This mine proved to be one of the richest silver mines in the county, producing not only low-grade ore, but wire silver, which I didn't know existed until I started this project. This is a low-resolution photo of some wire silver that was found at Leadville. Wire silver is a very high-grade ore that occurs in this form of silver strands. Soon, more miners were setting up tents at the confluence of Copper Creek and the East River at an elevation of 9,500 feet above sea level at the foot of Gothic Mountain, named, like I said, for these sort of cathedral-like spires on the mountain's face. By mid-July in 1879, this encampment had grown large enough to be incorporated as the town of Gothic. And this is what the town looked like around 1881. The official census in 1880 for Gothic's population was 950 people, but the actual population was probably several thousand when you add in all of the transient miners that were residing either temporarily in and around the town or in some of the outskirt lying areas. On a 10-day tour of Colorado silver country in August 1880, then President Ulysses S. Grant visited visited Gothic. And as it was reputed to be both one of, quote, the most promising cities in the state and, quote, the wildest mining camp in Colorado. So that was all very fancy. So while the miners could explore through uncharted wilderness, looking for claims, road connections were necessary once working mines were established to transport the ore out to markets east of here. So as was common in the region, the young county didn't yet have the finances to underwrite the costs of constructing roads. So private toll roads were built first. And you can see the remnant track of one here. This is the remnant of the toll road that's just below East Maroon Pass, again, near Copper Lake. Crested Butte and Gothic were connected as early as 1879 by a road winding around the east side of Crested Butte Mountain that was called the East River Toll Road, and it allowed pack mule trains to bring supplies in or minerals out of the mountains. By late 1881, the newly built Crested Butte, Ashcroft, and Gothic Toll Road ran straight north and around the west side of Crested Butte Mountain, cutting several miles off of the first route. A number of additional toll roads then connected Gothic to other smaller towns in the region. When large amounts of silver were found at Aspen to its north and sort of northeast, in 1881, the Aspen, Maroon Creek, and Gothic Toll Road was quickly constructed over East Maroon Pass, and that's the one you see here. It's now used as a trail, but it was at one point a toll road. It goes over a height of 11,800 feet, over which a passenger and mail stage ran between 1882 and 1886. It must have been a little bit terrifying, I have to say, to be in a wagon on these kinds of roads, but there it is. However, the coming of the railroad proved to be even more essential than toll roads in the continuing development of the towns in this region. Only the railroad had the speed and dependability to overcome the isolation of the North County area and make resource extraction profitable. Although the initial spark for settlement around the area was this rush for silver, it was not the silver mines, but the coal deposits around Crested Butte, as you can see here in this photo, that caught the interest of William Jackson Palmer of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. On November 21st, 1881, the railroad was extended from Gunnison up and made its final connection at Crested Butte. This photo is, I don't know what the year is, but it shows the old coal mine that's just on the very southern edge of the town of Crested Butte. Rails were supposed to connect to Gothic, both from Gunnison and Aspen, but the plans were never realized. Without that railroad connection, the cost of transporting ore out of the smaller camps in the area became prohibitively high. This barrier, combined with the dropping price of silver on world markets and also the long, harsh winters, sent the town quickly into its decline. And you can see, so this photo is from 1908. This one is probably taken sometime in the 1910s. There was a brief resurgence of mineral interest to the area in the 1910s. I have yet to do any research on this to learn about what sort of caused that sudden attention, but it died down again pretty quickly. I was going to divide this into 4 parts, but this part went really fast. So I'm just going to do part 3 as part of this video as well, which is the establishment of RMBL. Hooray! Okay, so in 1928, Dr. John C. Johnson, who was a biology professor and dean at Western State College in Gunnison at the time, decided that the abandoned town site of Gothic would be an ideal site for an independent, high-altitude biological field laboratory. Many of the dilapidated buildings from the silver mining days remained on site, and so it provided sort of a natural location to house both students and researchers. Dr. Johnson actually first visited Gothic in 1919, just after he completed his PhD at UC Berkeley, my alma mater, so go Bears. And he noticed on this visit that it was also one of the wettest regions in the Rockies, which contributed to its having an incredibly diverse array of different ecological habitats, all within fairly close proximity to the old Gothic town site. In 1922, he established a Western State controlled field station in nearby Taylor Canyon. It's only about 12 miles from Western's campus in Gunnison. And he called that the Rocky Mountain Biological Station. But he would bring students up to Gothic for field trips and other excursions, like this photo taken in 1923 from the top of Gothic Mountain, which is a little crazy. They must have carried a big 8x10 camera all the way up there. So he was using this place, like I said, for field trips and so on. Then a miner named Garwood Judd, here he is in 1923. He had arrived at Gothic in 1880, and unlike most people, he stuck around. After the town went bust, he became known as the man who stayed, because he stayed and lived the rest of his life here at Gothic. He owned some property at Gothic, and in 1925, when Johnson's field trip was stuck in their tents in the rain, Judd proposed to Johnson that Johnson buy this building, known as the Swallow's Nest. It's actually was originally a lawyer's office. You can tell because of the curved windows, apparently. That is a sign that lawyers lived here. So Judd proposed that Johnson buy the Swallow's Nest from him for $150. So this was the first building that Johnson purchased at Gothic, and it is still there today. It's been refurbished and is actually in fairly good shape. One of the few original buildings still at Gothic. Then a year later, in 1926, Judd also sold Johnson the dilapidated Grant Hotel, which is in this photo from 1923. It's this building down here, just barely in the photo. The Grant Hotel would provide more shelter for what Judd was now calling the bugologists. He sold him the hotel for only $3. It was actually owned by somebody else, but Judd somehow was intermediary and was able to get the deed and get it to Johnson. Johnson eventually purchased the entire town site as a new location for his field station, including the old town hall, which had been most recently used as a saloon at that time. This photo's, I don't have a date for it, but it's probably the 1910s. This is what it looked like when Judd owned it in 1923. A little bit falling apart. And it has, again, like the Swallow's Nest, has been restored and is now being used as a cafe and a few other uses in the summer. One of the unusual aspects of RMBL's history that I certainly wasn't expecting and didn't know until I started this work is that racial politics actually had an unexpected influence here in establishing RMBL at this place. In the mid-1920s, Colorado politics were dominated by the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, including Denver Mayor's Ben Stapleton. This is a parade from the 1920s in Denver. The KKK was mostly encouraging sentiment against immigrants coming to this area, which, the mining boom really brought a lot of, especially Eastern European immigrants to Colorado. And through their influence, a number of academics across the state were fired, including the president of Western State College and Johnson as the dean and the president's right-hand man. Johnson actually fought this in court. He actually then won his battle in court and promptly quit because he didn't want to work for the university that was now controlled by sort of KKK operatives. After his firing, Johnson was adamant that he would recreate the Rocky Mountain Biological Station that he had started up in several years earlier in Taylor Canyon, but he would recreate it as an independent organization so that it wouldn't be under the Klan's thumb. For the first year at Gothic, he actually reused the name, the Rocky Mountain Biological Station. This picture is from 1929, taken by Harriet Barkley. But when Western State complained and threatened legal action in 1930, they formally changed the name of this new organization to RMBL. So the same mountains that had made life so difficult and isolated for the miners of the 1880s had kept others out too. And this region north of Crested Butte had remained relatively empty of other human settlement. This is what it looked like in 1929. And here's more or less the same view from 1975. In adapting this mining landscape to a science-oriented one, the lab has maintained much of its historic design and appearance. So it still kind of looks like a ghost town. But it also leaves a subtle imprint on the surroundings, particularly through its attempts to preserve the isolation that originally caused mining to fail in this area. So this video has been parts 2 and 3, because they were a little bit shorter, of my talk, and I'm going to end screen sharing and stop the video now, and hopefully you'll go on to part 4, which will be documenting the early days of RMBL, really getting into my archival work. Thanks.